I think on a few levels, one obviously is when the university moved to having all the students leave campus and migrate all the courses over to teaching online, which happened sort of in the midst of spring break. Partway through spring break, students were alerted that they were not to come back to campus. And there was, at least in the moment, this idea that in 2 or 3 weeks they would come back. But I think being somebody who studies the news and looks at what's going on in the world, that didn't seem realistic. And then it sort of was, well, maybe people will come back. And at the end of March, first week in April, that's not going to happen either. And essentially, students are not going to be back on campus through the end of the semester. So as somebody who had never taught online before, the idea seemed pretty daunting about migrating everything over and trying to figure out how to teach the way I would normally teach. And I ultimately, after talking to a lot of people who were struggling the same way, a bunch of us just decided that's not what we were going to do. We weren't going to try to figure out how to do everything we would normally do. That it would just be too much to try to do and too much to try to demand of students whose lives are just as disrupted, maybe even more so than some of ours. And so I've modified what I'm doing. I've had Zoom classes with my students, Zoom discussion meetings with them about their research. Eventually, we're going to start doing advising online at some point in the next 2 or 3 weeks hopefully for an open campus come September. So all of that's been pretty disruptive. Compared to other people, though, I find myself fairly well off in the sense that I'm still being paid, as opposed to, for example, my own two children who work in hotels and restaurants, both of whom have lost their jobs, at least for the near term. And, people in Lowell who are already living somewhat marginal lives, just working paycheck to paycheck, or maybe with a few $100s in the bank, which is about the norm in the country. Those folks are definitely going to be hurting. And I definitely don't feel like in that same boat at all. I've done a lot of rewatching of my favorite old TV shows like The Wire and things like that. I'm just starting to rewatch Amazon Prime, which has a series called Bosch, which is about a detective based in LA. I love the books written by a guy named Michael Connelly, so I was always intrigued by what the TV show would look like. I've watched them all, but now I just binged over the weekend season 1 of that. I've read a lot of books. I've ordered 3 books on pandemics. They haven't come yet, thankfully, because I'll probably drive myself crazy when I do. I've taken lots of walks, being careful to observe crossing the street if I see somebody coming toward me. But I feel like if I don't get out of the house, that's not going to be good. I live alone, so that has advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is I don't have to worry. If I get sick, I'm not going to make anybody else in my immediate circle sick, and nobody from the outside is coming in to potentially make me sick. And so I figure I've gone this long since everything broke, and I have a cold, but I'm basically fine, no fevers, no anything. And being careful, I figure I'll be okay. On doing the social isolation, I'm not happy with it, but I get it, I understand it, and I don't think there's really much else we can do at this point, but do what we're doing. So just have to adjust to it. I'm sleeping really well, so which means I'm not like freaking out completely yet. But I really like to teach, and not being able to do that definitely is something that I miss. Everything that I've read suggests that while people have a general understanding of how this transmits from person to person, they're not completely sure yet. It's too new to have science to really understand it, but I'm pretty persuaded that one of the ways that it gets transposed from one person to another, is through people coughing on somebody, or people having it on their hands from coughing into their hand, not their arm, and then touching something that fairly quickly thereafter somebody touches. And on top of that, it seems like people, again, from everything I've read, you can have it in you and not be sick, or being mildly sick, not have a fever, let's say, which is a symptom lots of people point to. And so you could have a normal temperature and think, well, I'm okay, and then go out, but actually spread the disease that way, and yourself maybe end up with a very mild case, but to somebody with already pre-existing health conditions, you could make those conditions infinitely worse. And so I think, again, because we don't really know, it seems to me that the social distancing is about the best we can do until really the science comes up, probably with some sort of a vaccine. But I'm feeling like that's 6 months to a year away. I was talking about this on the radio the other day, on Radio Boston, and I was reflecting back on the history that I teach, and in the 1930s, with the Great Depression, people organized, mobilized, collectivized, whatever word you want to use, but they stood together. They had rents. They didn't have a virtual rent strike. They had a real rent strike. They didn't have a virtual factory occupation. They had a real factory occupation. They were not in any way forced to be separate. The conditions actually forced them in a way, if they wanted to address their grievances, to be together. And so I think that's what's really difficult. And so I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's mutual aid, and there's, like, in Lowell, there's been a lot of focus on trying to figure out how to do that. I mean, again, because I'm working and get a check, I've bought gift certificates to a number of restaurants in Lowell, betting that in the summer they're going to reopen, and I'm going to go out to eat every night of the week so they can hopefully get back on their feet. A friend of mine owns a independent bookshop in South Hadley, Mass. I bought a gift certificate to the bookstore to help them keep going, because, again, they've closed. So they're selling books online, but nobody can go in. So I'm trying to do those sorts of things, and being really conscious of that kind of, which, again, is a luxury that I have. I fully appreciate it. I'm trying to do solidarity buying, if there is such a thing. I don't know, maybe I just made up a freaking word or term or something, but I'm trying to figure out, like, that. And then from the student side of things, I've contacted, I've sent emails to students even that I've had 2, 3, 4 years ago. How you doing? Hope you're okay. Thinking about you, blah, blah, blah. If that means anything, I don't know, but I feel like it's the least I can do. I have advisees that I'm supervising their master's degree thesis, their doctoral dissertations, their honors college theses, all students who plan to graduate. And so I'm trying to keep their spirits up, push them, be involved working with them so that they can get done. Because that's a lot of stress on them, and I fully understand it. So trying to do those things that are within my individual power to do. I'm also trying to be really conscious that every time I turn the TV on, I'm the target age for, like, you could die from this. And so, while I would like to go out and do more, I'm also being mindful of that doesn't necessarily make any sense either. If it doesn't help anybody if more people get sick doing silly things. So I'm doing the best that I can do using again, and I'm lucky. I have a computer, I have stable Wi-Fi, I have all the books I could possibly want to read, and a great television. So, and a vast record collection. So I can entertain myself when I have to. I am a jazz person by sort of years and years. I had a college jazz radio show when I was, in the 70s and whatever, called Bob After Dark. And so Lots of John Coltrane, lots of Miles Davis, things like that. I think we can only, I think we can only do the, you know, what's within our purview. It's easy for me. I mean, I have a lot of friends who were former students who are obviously quite a bit younger than me and have 2 or 3 small kids at home. I don't know. I don't even want to begin to understand how difficult something like that is. And I think for a lot of those folks that I've been in touch with, they're spending lots of time, if they're fortunate enough to have a backyard, to be in that backyard, outside, playing, doing those sorts of things. I've sent a few friends history lessons for their kids. I mean, this will at some point break. And I do think that June, July, unfortunately, it's probably going to take that long. But then absent a vaccine, this well could start again when the cold weather comes in October, November. So I really feel like until there's a vaccine, we just have to be really socially conscious about doing the right thing and just trying to bolster each other, checking in on our friends and neighbors, and making sure folks are as okay as they possibly can be. Beyond that, there's not much we can do.